Today we're going to talk about 5 major chord progression ideas, and I'm hoping that some of these chord progressions are either new to you or ones you haven't thought about or used in a while. They're not going to be complex or way out there or anything like that. They're going to be very usable, all staying within the major key, but I'm hoping that they give you some new song ideas, some new inspiration, maybe help you come up with some new melody ideas and stuff that you wouldn't normally. So, all that said, let's get started. All these progressions are going to be in a major key, and also we're just going to stay in the key of G the whole time. Keep things real nice and simple. We're not going to bounce around and all that kind of stuff. Stay in the key of G. So the first chord progression we're going to look at is the 1, minor 2, 4, and 5. Alright, so this is one of those progressions I think works really well for verses. Of course, all these progressions could work anywhere in a song basically, but when I think of this one, this is kind of a verse progression to me. I like the way it kind of just walks up and kind of just adds this drama, builds, and then it comes back down to that 1 and kind of builds and it comes back down to that 1. Now, one thing I like to do with this chord progression sometimes to change it up a little bit is if you go through it twice, on that first time, don't go to that 5 chord, that D chord in the key of G. Just hang out on the C chord, and that way it builds a little bit of extra tension because your ear is wanting to hear that 5 chord because that's where it expects it to go, but it doesn't, and so it builds a little extra tension that can be really nice. Alright, chord progression number 2 is the minor 6, 5, 4. Now, this is one that I like to use a lot for like a bridge section, or sometimes if we're coming out of like a big, huge, major, happy feeling chorus or a solo or something, and we want to kind of bring things down for a moment. This is a great way to do it because we're going from this major tonality and we're kind of just switching to minor for a moment. That minor 6 in there kind of says, hey, let's kind of feel minor for a second without getting too out there. And the nice walk down between the 5 and then down to the 4. And so kind of like the last chord progression, sometimes I like to go minor 6, 5, 4, hang out on the 4, and then next time around, if there's a next time, go minor 6, 5, 4, and then back up to the 5. And that leads really nicely back down to the 1 chord. So let's hear what that might kind of sound like in context. Alright, so again, great for bridges, great for bringing things down and then pushing right back into a big chorus, adding a lot of drum and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really good one. Alright, chord progression number 3 is going to be the 4, 1, minor 2, 5. Now what's great about this chord progression is that it starts on the 4 and at the end that 5 chord leads to the 4 chord, and it never really quite resolves. It never really feels settled. And what it does is it kind of just gives this lift in your song, and then it kind of just holds things up there and kind of just keeps circulating and circulating and circulating. And then at the very end, you can just drop in on that 1 chord for that big payoff, that big resolve that everybody's waiting for. So if you use it as a pre-chorus, you can drop into a big chorus and it just sounds huge. Or I like to use it for a chorus, which keeps just going and going there for a while. And then the payoff is at the very end. It's this big resolution where everyone just feels like, ah, there it is, right? And that's a very memorable thing to our ears. All right, so if you're finding this helpful, make sure you check out the link in the description down below, and there you can grab my free chord progression builder cheat sheet. And what it has is it has a bunch of chord progressions, both in major and minor. It has all the keys spelled out, both major and minor. It tells you what the 1 chord is, what the minor 6 chord is, what the flat 7 chord is, all that in all the different keys. Plus, it has roadmaps for building your own chord progressions, again, both in major and minor. So if you're on the minor 2 in the major chord progression, you can look at this roadmap and it'll tell you which chords you can move to next that will automatically sound good. So make sure you check that out in the link in the description down below. And yeah, let's move on to chord progression number 4. All right, so this chord progression is a really cool one. It's very laid back and kind of chill in a lot of ways. And we're going to actually introduce a new chord that we haven't used yet, and that is the minor 3 chord. And that doesn't seem to get used a whole lot, especially in rock and pop and stuff. And it's just got a really cool vibe to it. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, this is one you might want to check out. And this progression is going to be the 1, the minor 3, the minor 2, and then 4, 5. So if you remember back all the way in chord progression number 1, it had a nice walk up. The thing I like about this one, it has that nice walk down. And so it has that kind of, again, just chilled out vibe because of that walk down feeling it has. And it's got 2 minor chords in it too. So again, it's got more of a mellow feel instead of all the majorness, right, of some of the other chord progressions. This one has a lot of minor chords in it comparatively, so it has a much more mellow feel. Now, again, like we've done before, one thing I like to do with this one is instead of moving to that 5 chord, I like to hang out on that 4 chord at the end of the first time around. And again, it just kind of builds that drama and that tension a little bit because, again, the ear is expecting to hear that 5 chord. Progression number 5. This one is going to be a little bit different, and the thing I like about this one is it kind of gives the ear a little twist of a, what was that? That was unexpected, right? So in this one, we're actually going to step out of the key of G for just a moment, and then we're going to come right back in, and it's just going to have a nice, cool vibe and feel that's a little unexpected. So this one is the 1, the secondary dominant, and then the 4. So if you noticed, when we play that A chord, normally an A chord in the key of G major is going to be minor because it's the 2 chords are minor chords in a major key, right? But we played it an A major there. So now we have this C sharp note that's in the A major chord that's been introduced, and it is not part of the key of G major. And so it has this little kind of twist to it, right? If you notice, I called it a secondary dominant, and you're probably thinking, what does that mean? So essentially, the real quick theory version of this is that if we're in the key of G, our 1 chord is a G major chord. When we say the dominant chord in the key of G, the dominant chord is same thing as saying the 5 chord, right? The 5 is kind of the number or the position chord. Dominant is more of the theory way of saying what it's doing. So the dominant chord is the 5 chord, which in this case, again, would be D major. So now that we're playing that D major chord, if in our brains, if we switch to the key of D major real quick and pretend that D major chord is now our 1, the dominant or the 5 chord would then be A major, and that's where that comes. That's the dominant chord of D, which D is the dominant chord of G. So we have A major, which is dominant of D, which is the dominant of G. And you see we got the secondary dominant because the second dominant. So that's where that's coming from. That's what all that means. Now, one thing to look out for when using the secondary dominant, especially in a way like this, you don't want to typically, again, no rules, but typically you don't want to go G, which is the 1 chord, to that secondary dominant, which is the A major chord, then to the 5 chord, which would be D, because now you're playing G, A, D, and instead of sounding like the key of G, it's actually going to sound like you're in the key of D. You hear how that D sounds like the resolution? Yeah, now it kind of sounds like we're in the key of D. If you want to go to the D chord in this, then I would suggest probably doing something more like the 1 secondary dominant 4 like we've been doing, and then move to that D or the 5 chord. And when you come back to that G, it's going to resolve nicely and sound like you're still in the key of G. So now you hear that D resolving back down to the G, and it sounds like we're still in the key of G. So very cool chord progression, very cool sound, and a little fun theory in there as well. All right, since you stuck it out this long, you get a bonus chord progression. So give yourself a little round of applause. All those other people that already clicked off this video, they're all missing out, and you're hanging with the cool kids now. So anyways, chord progression 6 is one that you already know. It's going to be the 1, 4, 5. So I wanted to include this 1, 4, 5 chord progression as a bonus because I just want to say don't discount the 1, 4, 5. There are so many creative things you can do with those 3 chords, so many catchy melodies that come from that, so many things that make it easy for people to sing along with and get stuck in their head. And you can say, well, the 1, 4, 5 is so overused, it's so popular, it's predictable, and you're right on a lot of those things. It definitely is, but you can still get creative with it and make it less 1, 4, 5-y, or kind of just lean into it, right? And just make it all that 1, 4, 5 is. You see this stuff a lot in country, definitely in rock and pop and stuff like that too. But if you're looking for ways to make it a little less 1, 4, 5 sounding, you can do stuff like just add a little melody to the parts. In this case, the guitar part. So having those melodic notes passing through there sounds a little less like 1, 4, 5, even though it was just G, C, D, and back to G. Of course, the other thing you can do is just change up the order, change up the duration, all those kinds of things, and it'll still have that nice major, happy, upbeat, catchy kind of feel, but you can always make it sound just a little different. So still using those 3 chords, but just changing them up the order a little bit, bouncing around back and forth, and it's very catchy, very upbeat, and you could probably hear like 105 different melodies that go with that. So again, the 145 is a great chord progression, but you know, feel free to get a little creative with it, change it up, twist it up a little bit, and yeah, lots of cool stuff in the 145. All right, so as we wrap this up, make sure you check out that description down below. Again, you grab my chord progression builder cheat sheet. Again, it has the roadmap for choosing the next chord when you're building out your own chord progressions. If you're not sure what's going to sound good next, it'll let you know, both major and minor. And of course, it spells out all the major and minor keys and tells you which chords within those keys are going to be major or minor or even diminished, those kinds of things. And yeah, again, check that out down below. If you found this video helpful, as always, please like and subscribe. And you should be seeing some videos probably around here. Make sure you check those out, and I will see you next time, hopefully in one of those videos. And yeah, have a good one.